parties taking place. We expect to see a lot of music. We also expect that Trump, who will then be the president, may sign some of those executive orders that he has promised he will be enacting today as among his first official acts on becoming president for a second term. So there is also another shot of the U.S. Capitol down Pennsylvania Avenue. That is the traditional parade route where we would have anticipated seeing Donald Trump travel between the Capitol and the White House. He may be driving along that route, but it won't be lined with the tens of thousands of people who ordinarily would have been out there to see him make that very traditional inaugural trip. It is very cold, so officials have told people to stay inside to observe these official proceedings from elsewhere and not gather in large numbers outside. Here in Washington, it is currently about 24 degrees, and it is not anticipated to be much warmer than that at noon, which is when Donald Trump will officially be the next president of the United States. We are still waiting on the Trumps to arrive here at the White House for their tea and coffee private gathering with President Joe Biden and Jill Biden. But we will continue to watch for Donald Trump and Melania Trump to make that trip over to the White House, their last, before they officially become president and first lady.
Exactly right. Sure. Thank you.
Il y a des gens peut-être qui pensent qu'on a écrit un propos mal intentionné, mais c'est des conflits d'intérêts, d'avoir une proximité avec le pouvoir, avoir des éléments.
You're seeing there again a shot of the White House where President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden have just welcomed the Trumps, Donald Trump and Melania Trump, in for their private gathering. On the left, though, you see the Capitol as well as the helicopter that will take the Bidens away from Washington as the former president and former First Lady in just a couple of hours from now. And this may be a good opportunity for us, Sagar, to kind of talk a little bit about Joe Biden's final actions as president. This is the last day that he will be the current president of the United States. But it has been a pretty active day in terms of official things that he can do in the final hours of his administration. So let's talk a little bit about what are some of those things that we have seen coming out of the Biden White House in these last moments.
The thing that has gotten the most attention that happened, let's see, about two and a half hours ago now, a lot of pardons and commutations from the president in previous days. Some very big names being preemptively pardoned this morning. The president has issued pardons to Dr. Anthony Fauci, the former head of infectious disease research for the United States, General Mark Milley, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the members of the House panel that investigated the January 6th attacks. This is after Trump had basically throughout his campaign vowed retribution against those that he perceived tried to hurt him, tried to hurt the nation. He has long gone after General Milley, whom again, he handpicked as his senior military advisor to be in charge of America's military. Long at odds with Anthony Fauci over the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. And then, of course, the January 6th riot, where the president-elect has already said he wants to pardon the rioters. President Biden has now preemptively moved to shield those officials from anything that might happen. He says this is not an admission of guilt or wrongdoing or a thought that they may face prosecution, but I couldn't not do something about this. Both General Milley and Dr. Fauci have come out and said that they appreciate it, that they did not want to have to fight back against what someone, in this case Donald Trump, perceived as some type of slight. Tony Fauci flat says, I have not committed any crimes. I have spent my entire career trying to keep the American people healthy, but I appreciate the president's move. So this is something that had been discussed within the White House for months now. Is the president going to preemptively move to keep these folks out of harm's way, for lack of a better phrase? And that's exactly what he did this morning. It's an extraordinary use of presidential authority and could set the tone for Trump and others to then take actions like this immediately before they leave office.
Right, it's a large action to take, but also literally in the closing hours of an administration. I guess, I mean, there's less time for it to be analyzed while that presidency is still ongoing, because the news cycle will move on necessarily to this next administration. I'm not attempting to analyze exactly why the timing was put like that, but it is something that those of us who cover this have been wondering for a long time. Is this going to happen? And now that it finally has happened in these very closing hours.
It is customary for citizens who've been, in the president's case, convicted of drug crimes and things to receive clemency, but to do it in this kind of untested way with this type of name, Tony Fauci, Mark Milley, Benny Thompson, Liz Cheney right down the row, incredibly unusual. And, as we talk about the peaceful transfer of power and, they smiled and shook hands at the White House, and what are they going to chat about in the limousine? This is directly from President Biden to his successor, hey, you said you're going to do this? I'm not going to let you do it. So here you go. Hours before you have the office, it's still my job. I can do whatever I want. Just pretty stark to see it come out this morning.
Certainly. And then again, that limo ride between where they are right now, you see on your screen in the White House, to where you see on the left-hand side the U.S. Capitol building. That is something I would love to be a fly on the wall just to hear what is discussed and what goes on in that conversation. You're seeing now other images of Washington. On the left-hand side, the U.S. Capitol down Pennsylvania Avenue, that traditional parade route where we expect Donald Trump to be traveling, but perhaps not officially in the parade that ordinarily would take place on an inauguration. That all has been called off and rescheduled to an event you see on the right-hand side in the Capital One Arena here in Washington, where there will be, it's still being called a parade, but we're not exactly sure that it will have the same sort of format, certainly not the marching down Pennsylvania Avenue, but that's where Donald Trump will be going after he is sworn in as president here in just a few hours. And we expect also to see him sign some of those executive orders that Sagar and I have been talking about, some actions that he can take as president and has promised to do, and said right there in Capital One Arena last night that he felt his supporters would be very pleased with the type of executive orders that he would be signing today. So we will keep an eye on all of those spots, but right now, the Trumps and the Bidens continue their coffee and tea private gathering there in the White House on the upper right part of your screen.
Pinching off to the side
Ladies and gentlemen, former Senate Majority Leader, the Honorable Mitch McConnell, accompanied by the Honorable Elaine Chao. Ladies and gentlemen, former speakers of the House of Representatives, the Honorable Kevin McCarthy, the Honorable John Boehner, accompanied by Mrs. Debbie Boehner, the Honorable Newt Gingrich, accompanied by Ambassador Callista Gingrich, and Mrs. Heather Foley.
our knowledge ready to go? Already going to go separately, but they're going to go into the door, into the windows right here.
Yes. Spouses will go first. The second spouses will go
Okay,
first.
so everybody will go in right here.
Everybody's going to go, yeah, one car at a time. They'll fill up, leave, the next one comes up.
Okay, very good.
Not yet.
photo, and they didn't. You guys know who these are? Mine and his. That's all right. If you do, you pick it up and just put it in the bushes. We'll take care of it. They're coming out. Coming out.
At the portico of the White House, we'll be taking Doug Emhoff and Usha Vance off to the U.S. Capitol. They are departing now. We expect next to see Vice President Kamala Harris and the incoming Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, exiting next and getting into their limousine to be taken off to the U.S. Capitol. Of course, J.D. Vance here in just a little over an hour and a half from now will be the Vice President of the United States, being sworn in by Supreme Court Associate Justice Brett Kavanaugh, one of his longtime friends, as we're all reading up on history of all of the characters involved with this Inauguration Day. They've known each other since their Yale Law School days, so there's a fun fact for you. But here we're still looking at pictures of the White House where for the past little bit of time, under an hour, there's been a unofficial casual tea and coffee, off the record, at least not privy to reporters like me, but a meeting between President Joe Biden, First Lady Jill Biden, and the incoming President Donald Trump, President-elect, and Melania Trump, his wife. They have been gathering for one of these moments that we see on Inauguration Days here at the White House. And soon, those two will also be getting into a car together and making that trip just a couple of miles down to the U.S. Capitol, where the rest of the official swearing in for Donald Trump's inauguration will be happening on this Monday, January 20th, here in Washington, D.C. So we're looking at those doors, waiting to see who's there's really only about 5 or 6 hours to get it all done. What all is going to be happening once they exit those doors?
Yeah, it is a fascinating choreography that takes place right now at the White House. We're looking at the North Portico. Well, they arrived and they'll be leaving. On the other side of the White House, there are moving trucks lined up that will be waved in the instant that the Bidens and the Trumps leave. One group will be moving all the Biden stuff out. One group will be moving all the Trump stuff in. In between, stripping all the beds, shampooing the carpets, replacing what needs to be replaced. Linens, towels, whatever it might be. Closets stocked. The White House usher's office would have been in touch with the Trumps for the last few months about where certain things go, what are the favorite foods and snacks that we need to have in the various kitchens, in the residence, and elsewhere. We know all about Donald Trump and his penchant for Diet Coke. say, hey, let's take a quick selfie. I mean, I've done that, walking along that when we're, out covering White House events. But for the President and First Lady to get to do that one last time, because as you said, when those doors open again and they walk out, that's it. They're boarding what would be known as Marine One and heading out. And that is the end of the Biden presidency.
Yeah, it's just so interesting to think about, what you were just mentioning about that personal side of things. What we're watching are all of these official events, and what we know always is part of the tick-tock of a day, like Inauguration Day. There are set pieces. There are even specific times assigned to a lot of this, especially that noontime when it is according to the way that things are set out. It's not just we picked this time. It's like that is the official time. Now we're seeing those doors at the north portico of the White House open again. We see First Lady Jill Biden and incoming First Lady Melania Trump exiting and getting into their own limousine, where they will be taken over to the U.S. Capitol. As we think about these situations, Sagar, we have talked a little bit about the outgoing president and the incoming president and kind of what they might share in casual conversation. But this is also a First Lady who's been here before. Melania Trump has been in the White House. And I wonder she's at the end of this next term, she will have been First Lady for longer than Jill Biden was. She will have more experience, but I just wonder what their
But she didn't need that this time. And in fact, she skipped Donald Trump's visit here after the election. She knew what it was about, and she knew what she was getting into, and she seemed visibly more comfortable in this interview with the prospect of, moving away from Trump Tower and moving away from these big gilded residences that they have in Florida and elsewhere, and moving into the White House. And taking pains to note that Barron Trump will have a bedroom in the White House for when he comes home to visit from college. He's not the little kid he was during the first Trump administration. He's now about, I think, taller than his father. Now it's a little bit jarring to see, frankly.
He has definitely grown up and attending colleges in New York City. Now we see Vice President Kamala Harris and incoming Vice President J.D. Vance making their exit. Let's listen in as they depart for the U.S. Capitol.
Thank you, sir.
So there's just one pair left in terms of who we anticipate to be departing the White House and heading to the U.S. Capitol. That will be President Joe Biden and President-elect Donald Trump, who will be getting into what you see there, that limousine that's pulling up here at the north portico of the White House to take them to the U.S. Capitol for Donald Trump's second inauguration.
President Biden confirmed.
sir. How are you
Morning,
this morning?
everybody. Good
Mr.
morning. Thank you.
President Trump, how do you feel? President Biden?
Well,
Good morning, Mr. Vice President. How do you feel? Any comments, sir? Nope.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President-elect's cabinet and cabinet-level designees.